Well, perhaps the key message is that it's not simply a matter of switching the language of instruction. One also needs to adapt the pedagogy to take into account that students are facing the extra cognitive challenge of learning through a language that they have not fully yet acquired. But I would say there are a few other points that are important to take into consideration. One, that it's important to take on board the learning from education research in general. So people such as John Hattie and others have done meta-studies looking at what are the greatest influences on learning. Which are those strategies which help students to learn the best? And some of these are those strategies that help students to become assessment literate, to reflect on their own learning, to become autonomous learners. So some of these practices have a very high positive impact on learning in general. So if we're going to be operating in a CLIL context where students are facing that extra challenge of learning through a second language, I think it's important to take on some of that learning from education research in general. And then secondly, there's also a great deal of research looking at what are those teaching and learning practices that are also important to take into account in CLIL contexts. And there are many, but perhaps I would highlight the importance of scaffolding, the importance of offering students some extra support to help them go beyond where they could go on their own. And that involves providing support to get students to understand, reflect on, use the content they are being taught, making sure that lots of language is being provided, lots of language scaffolding, so students can produce lots of output, or more specifically, that students have the language that they need to talk about the content. I also think it's exceptionally important to make visible the academic language that needs to be learned. Several well-known academics have referred to the fact that academic language is no one's mother tongue. I think it was Bourdieu and Passeron who made this statement for the first time. So academic language is a challenge to learn even in one's mother tongue. So it becomes particularly important to make that language visible to the students, the language that we expect them to use in a CLIL context. Well, we actually have a great deal of knowledge about that. CLIL programs have been developed in Asia, in the Middle East, in Europe, in North America, and South America, and there are numerous common characteristics that have been found in successful CLIL programs. One of the key messages, I think, is that CLIL works, and it works in a wide variety of contexts, but CLIL is an approach, and that approach needs to take into account the context. So each context, each country, each region may apply CLIL in a slightly different fashion. So one has to be aware of one's context and take that into account. It's important to plan very well. It's important to work with one's stakeholders. By stakeholders, I mean anyone who can be affected by the program or anyone that the program can affect. So one hears what their needs are, what their concerns are, so those can be addressed. We know that CLIL programs need to be very well planned and thought through. The better the planning, the more likely the program will be successful. We also know that it's not simply a matter of educating teachers and doing teacher training. We know that teachers need long-term support. They need opportunities to meet. They need opportunities to speak with each other, to work with each other. And we know that it's not just a matter of training teachers or supporting teachers. We need to support school directors or school principals, local administrators. We need to make sure that universities are building their capacities to train CLIL teachers, to train CLIL school principals, and so forth. So there are a large number of stakeholders involved, and I think it's necessary to take a really holistic view, once again, about a holistic view that takes into account who will be touched by these programs, who will be affected by them, and who can be affected by these programs. It's very important, of course, to have mechanisms in place, such as teacher training, support for developing materials, training for school principals, opportunities for universities to develop their capacity to research CLIL, to train teachers for CLIL. But it's equally important to make sure that one thinks about the softer side, issues such as beliefs, concerns that people have in relation to CLIL. People need to be aware of how CLIL works, what benefits CLIL can bring to them. People need opportunities to also really talk about their concerns that they might have or their fears that they might have. And the reason I say that is because CLIL requires a change. And any change usually provides a certain challenge, shall we say, to those who are going to implement that change. And we need to spend perhaps as much time focusing in on people's concerns, helping address work to hear their beliefs, and support them in raising their understanding about what is possible.
The evolution of CLIL, the CLIL approach, including methodology, I think that in the first years, it was not very well understood what was all that about, because it was just thought a different way to approach teaching languages. Little by little, teachers, education authorities, all the stakeholders involved in bilingual education gained the knowledge that it was much more than that. It was an approach, it was an educational model which was transforming schools completely. Not only in terms of the methodology, which is extremely important, modifying the attitude towards transmission of content, but also because it was a dynamizer in schools. Teachers had to collaborate, teachers had to plan together, teachers had to evaluate according to the same procedures, criteria, instruments. As a whole, as I said, little by little, but with a better understanding with time, all the people involved in bilingual education understood that the approach CLIL was, if not the best possible, yes, indeed, the best possible for our context, in which one of the non-ideal factors was that the level of students probably was not too high. And in that sense, the CLIL approach offered the possibility through, as I said, collaboration, participation, using an appropriate methodology. It helped all the people to get together, and obviously it helped to enhance and improve the level of students very rapidly.